The definition of coaching culture is a place where authentic leaders and managers help people to grow, thrive and perform through effective conversations, honest feedback, underpinned by trust.
How you're defining a coaching culture, feedback is right at the epicenter and at the heart of that.
You don't need to be a professionally accredited coach to be a good human being at work. Let's treat people as human beings and they will behave like human beings at work.
People don't care what you know until they know that you care. If you think it's going to be a difficult conversation, guess what? You've set yourself up to fail straight away.
When it comes to work relationships, the work becomes easy.
Welcome to episode 14 of The Life of a Business Leader. I am delighted today to be joined by Jo Wright. She is the author of the title for today's podcast, No More Shit Managers. She's written a book on this subject. So I am super excited because having read the book, I've got some killer questions that's going to put Jo right on the spot. And as always with The Life of a Business Leader, it's about making it personalized, customized, so that you can take away some golden nuggets that you can take and implement in your business. So firstly, Jo, thank you so much for being a guest on The Life of a Business Leader. It's great to have you on the show.
Thank you very much. I'm delighted to be here and I'm intrigued to know how this conversation's going to go, these killer questions.
The great thing is, and I always say this, we do no prep work in terms of conversations that we have before, in terms of you having sight of questions. The great thing is, because you've got a great book out, a bestseller book, which we'll talk about as we go through the conversation, I am sure. It's great because it's so authentic and it can just be off the cuff. And I've got some real pointed questions that I really want to throw at you. So let's just hit the ground running. The title of your book is, and here's all my questions, by the way, I actually prepped and got them all down. The title of your book is Disruptive and it is provocative. No more shit managers. It implies there's a lot of shit managers out there. Is that what you're saying?
It's still, I feel like, how do politicians answer these questions? It's deliberately provocative, so it jumped off the bookshelf, to be honest. There's plenty of vanilla titled books out there, and my purpose behind the title was to get as many people as possible reading the book to start making a difference to the world of work. So there was a positive intent behind the cheeky title. And actually, the ultimate outcome, you've missed out the subheading of the book title, No More Shit Managers, 7 Steps to a Coaching Culture. And if more and more organizations started building a coaching culture, the capability of managers would increase. So do I think there's shit managers out there? Hell yeah. Do I think it's absolutely their fault? No. So actually, I want to help people be better at work.
And I deliberately didn't do the strap line that sat underneath it, because I wanted you to do that bit. And you're right, I mean, titles of books, it is about, do people pick up the book? Do they go, oh, that's interesting? So can we just play with this concept of shit managers for a moment? Because I know when I see stats quoted, there is this context of accidental managers. And I think in understanding why we might talk about shit managers or a differential in the quality of managers, the whole concept of accidental managers where people fall into it, do you think that's part of the reason why we have such a differential in the quality of management and leadership today across businesses?
Yeah, I think that's one of the biggest reasons is people get so good at what they do technically. It's like, oh, we've got more people. They need your help because you're good at that. You're going to now be their boss, kind of buddy to boss thing. And I think fundamentally becoming a manager of people is a career change. It's an absolute different role. It's not, I've gone in to be this technical wizard and now you're asking me to manage and lead and coach all these people who come to work with all people things. And that's not what I signed up for. I was loving this bit. Now, some people naturally flourish in that and others don't. And I think that is one of the key reasons. It's not the only reason, but I think it's one of the key reasons.
No, and it's people have got great specialists or technical operation in what they do, and they rise to the top. And then suddenly on the Friday, they're told they're going to be the head of the team on the Monday. And on the Friday they were a team colleague, and on the Monday that they were suddenly the manager. So there is this myth, isn't there, about do we really set people up for success? And do we really enable them with the transition that they need to make from being a great team colleague to suddenly being the leader manager of that team? And do you think that's where a lot of it falls down in terms of how we really enable and help them in that transition?
I think there is some of that. I think we don't always set people up for success, whether that's, you know, appropriate development, coaching, general support. I think people are just given that role and then they see it as it is often the best way to to get more money and to actually get a bigger role. Whereas
Yeah.
actually we don't promote breadth of experiences that really add so much value to an individual and an organization. We just promote this upwards trajectory, and that's where it falls down. And I think there's a lot to be done on development. I see coaching as a huge opportunity. And I think because people, I think training is important where you're actually helping people develop new skills. But for me, this is a mindset shift, and coaching helps with mindset.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Mindset, changing behaviors. Rather than giving somebody some new skills, we all need that direction with skills, but coaching, having better quality conversations, the opportunity to talk openly, and whether that's an external coach or actually helping leaders and managers become coaches, gives them the skills to help develop and care about their people in their teams. So this is why I'm on this sort of mission to get coaching out to the masses. And for me, obviously, the book is absolutely about the sweet spot being about leaders and managers having some level of capability to have better conversations. You and I know the difference at work is about the relationships that you have at work. It's about the people you can lean on, you can trust, you can talk to, the mentors, the people, you develop in that sort of atmosphere and environment rather than just being given the title of a head of and then struggling. Look,
So
you've got me on
let's
the soapbox already. Here it
No,
is.
it's brilliant. It's brilliant. And the great thing is that the one thing I know with you, Joe, is you are so passionate about this subject, and that absolutely comes through loud and clear. So, that's why I was so excited about having this conversation with you. In the consultancy training world, let me cut to the chase. There's lots of jargon and so forth. So, if I was a business leader and hadn't done what I've done for 2.5 decades, and I was listening to this interview now and us having this conversation, my question would be, what the hell is a coaching culture? So
Yeah.
can we just go forward to basics and unpack? When you talk about the 7 steps in creating a coaching culture, which from your book is an enabler to stop there being so many shit managers, what is a coaching culture? Let's make it real for our listener.
I mean, I've got a definition, so I can give you the definition that we created at Coaching Culture, and then I can tell you what that really means more practically. So,
Okay,
first,
brilliant.
the definition of coaching culture is a place where authentic leaders and managers help people to grow, thrive, and perform through effective conversations, honest feedback, underpinned by trust. So, conversations, feedback, and trust and authenticity are all in there. That would be a tattoo if I was brave enough to have one all the way down my arm.
It would need to be all the way down your arm. It's that long.
It would. Yeah, exactly. And so when I get asked on podcasts, I can read it out without forgetting it. But what does that really mean? It means having the confidence and capability to have those conversations, whatever those conversations might be, to build relationships, to help people perform at their best, to unlock people's potential. And it's more and more. So the culture of it is everybody being involved in unlocking potential, having better conversations, and not being frightened of having conversations that build performance. And actually, it comes from a place of positive intent. So I've put my hands on my heart automatically there, coming from a place of caring for the people around you and believing in them that they can be more, whatever be more is. It's not do more. It's not whip them till they do more. It's be more. Unlock the potential. Because a lot of people lack confidence, belief, they're fearful at work. Better conversations sort that out. And that's what a coaching culture is on a large scale. And it's about everybody and this is my sort of dream rather than reality sometimes, everybody role modeling better conversations. And even professional coaches, we talk about high support, high challenge. This isn't just about, stroking somebody's head and having a big fluffy conversation. This is about challenging people to be at their best and support them when they're not at the best. So for me, it's conversations and care at the heart of building a coaching culture. And it's interesting because more organizations are starting to wake up to this. Some are going backwards a little bit, actually. If they're in crisis mode, sometimes they just knuckle down and avoid the cultural conversation. But, before we started talking, I said to you, I'm getting busy by people saying through actually the book or through the business coaching culture, we want to build a coaching culture. So it's starting to resonate that when people talk about the culture they want, when they boil it down, it's a coaching culture. They talk about, I want to be an innovative culture, creative culture. We want a culture of belonging. We want an inclusive culture. All of that underpinned is a coaching culture. And that's what I want to get out and to the world, hence the book.
Love it, love it. Let me ask you one really specific question, because this is something that I, over the years, have come up against.
Yep.
And people will say to me, Royston, we want to create a coaching culture in our business.
Yeah.
And then when you get underneath the layer of it, what actually transpires is that leaders and managers need to be better at having performance conversations and
Yeah.
be better at delivering inspirational and developmental feedback. So I guess for me, where do you see the layering, or what's the difference between coaching somebody and then having a culture where you absolutely do have live in the moment developmental and inspirational feedback that's happening all the time? Are they one? Are they different? I'm really interested in your take on how you'd unpack that in terms of within this concept of a coaching culture.
So a coaching culture for me is what you described as the everyday conversation. So being able to have feedback in the moment, getting that, because feedback comes from a place of trust. If we don't trust somebody, if they give us feedback, often goes in one ear and out the next. Actually, when we trust people and we're believing that they are wanting us, they're giving us this feedback with positive intent that they want us to be better, to develop, then actually that's what a coaching culture is. It's everyday conversations, it's everyday feedback, as opposed to, and there's some examples in the book where I was the shit manager. It's my favorite bit of the book, actually. The bit where I describe the once a year performance conversation. So still having regular one-to-ones, but having a performance management, this is about confirming your bonus, reminding what was going on 11 months ago and talking about it, but saving up the feedback for that opportunity and building it up. And I'll in the book, it talks about me being the shittest of shit managers, who I call it AK-47 feedback, where I absolutely peppered somebody with feedback bullets and then, took a deep sigh of relief at the end of it. And that's not a coaching culture. That's a shit culture.
No, and you've stolen one of the things I was going to talk about later, because the bit that really resonated me in the chapter headers was that machine gun feedback, which is I think what you're talking about now, where it's like, you banked and saved it all up to the end of year performance conversation, and suddenly like you just let it out, and there's all this, and it's like, whoa, where's all this come from?
Absolutely, I'm going to take that moment to the grave, because it was awful, but it gave me one of those critical career light bulb moments. Those ones where you just suddenly go, hang on, there's something happened there. And I remember in that moment when somebody said back to me, I'm shocked to the core, rather than me feeling the defensive manager of, well, you shouldn't be, I literally, he held a mirror up to me going, I just thought that was me. What have I just done? It was terrible, but it made me realize other people were doing that around the world. other people are still doing that to this day. We need to stop that. We need to build confidence and capability to have
Yeah.
better conversations. So I could, all the things that have been bubbling in my mind throughout that year, I should have just been able to say them, and performance would have grown. That person would have grown. I would have grown. It would have been a win-win. And it's really interesting, Royston, because when I ask people to describe when you think of the word coaching or coach, what do you think of? Never ever do I get a bad word. And whether that's just because they're saying it to myself, they come out with words like, support, challenge, empathy, listening, questions, high performance. And it's like, well, if these words are all true, why are we not doing more of this then? Because that's fundamentally what it's about. And, it is about raising awareness on, conversations like ours today of what the difference can make, and getting rid of some of the myths. Because I think the word coaching sometimes holds some shitty myths about it. And it's getting rid of some of those to really let people realize these are the keys that unlock people's potential and make a difference.
Yeah, no, this is gold. So there's a couple of things like that, and hence my reason for asking that question about where does feedback sit in. Because what I'm hearing is that how you're defining a coaching culture, feedback is right at the epicenter and at the heart of that.
Yeah.
And what I sometimes fear is that when people talk about coaching, they think that's a long conversation where they're sat down with an individual. Whereas what I'm hearing you say is that coaching is about live in the moment feedback is an integral part of that, where you are delivering both inspirational, catch people doing it right, but also where it is appropriate, developmental feedback to help them to be the best version of themselves that they can be. You said something earlier, which I think is really important. You talked about a North Star of how within that coaching culture do you really get people to associate with the fact that any feedback is coming from a place of positivity. You talked about that at the start, which I think is really important, isn't it?
I think that is important. And one of the things when I did my coaching qualification, one of the things I remember, it stuck with me, what is the role of a coach? And this can be a leader as coach, manager as coach, a professional accredited coach. Have an unconditional positive regard for the person that you are talking to. So believe in them, trust in them, and therefore that trust is built, and you give feedback with positive intent, and they will receive it with positive intent, because it's just as tough to receive and give and receive feedback. And if we can start breaking down some of these barriers, relationships will flourish and the environment will flourish and people will thrive. And I think that's what it's about. I've experienced it so often in my career, kind of the good and the bad, as it were. Actually, when it's good and great, it's based on the trusting relationship you've got. And I suppose, it's not just about being a coach-like person, because I've experienced coaches who've actually also been great coaches, but shit managers. So actually, it's how do you package it all up as being a decent human being at work? Yeah. That's fundamentally what we're talking about. So yeah, feedback is integral. It has to be. And I know you talked then about that coaching, that sort of like hour-long, 90-minute conversation. So there's absolutely a place for that. But for me, we have to get leaders and managers they're the ones having more and more of the conversations. We have to upskill those people to have better conversations and more trusting relationships, because when they unlock those keys with the keys, things change. And you don't need to be a professionally accredited coach to be a good human being at work.
Love it.
And it's interesting. I've got this sort of capability triangle. And for me, the top is the people who are being paid to be a professionally accredited coach because they've spent a lot of coaching hours, they've done a lot of CPD. Then there's the people internally who do a bit of coaching more that one-to-one, 1 hour thing. But then there's the everyday moments, which is leaders and managers. And for me, that's where the magic happens. That's where you get the
Yeah.
scalable difference on a cultural level. And even better are team coaching opportunities and leaders and managers doing that, and also self-coaching. So when people recognize really good questions, rather than diving to their manager going, I've got a question, actually, I'm going to ask myself the question, because to be honest, if I sit and think, I probably got the answer. So there's a whole lot of stuff going on there.
Yeah, I love it. I love it. And my next question you've just kind of alluded to there, which was, I talk about this concept of people being their own performance coach. And actually, if you can start with coaching self and looking in your own mirror, then actually you might get to the stage where you go, do I need to ask that question? If my leader or manager wasn't here, or a team colleague wasn't here to ask that question, what would I do? And how can you stop the flow further upstream by actually, is part of that coaching culture where actually the individual takes ownership for being their own performance coach, for self-coaching, even before you start to get to the leader or manager. And that's kind of what I kind of heard you starting to allude to.
Definitely. Absolutely. And for me, coaching is a life skill. It's a communication skill. And I say to people, don't be afraid of the C word. People go, ooh, coaching. Ooh, I've got a coach. Ooh, and it's like, don't be afraid of that word. It's communication. It's conversations. It's care, collaboration. I've got a string of other C words that are positive C words that mean that people don't need to be afraid of the word coaching. And I think that's my mission, to actually get rid of some of the old school thinking about what is coaching and what isn't it not, and how can we help people have that confidence and capability to move a little bit from tell into a little bit more ask. I say to people don't change when you tell them to. They don't. I've also made up a word recently that I quite like, called pushback ability. So the more you tell people, the more they tend to push back from it. They have
Yeah.
to want to change. They have to want to do whatever that is. And that's not just at work, that's in life. So the more we inspire people through and get them thinking for themselves and recognize the benefits of any level of change, then that's when they'll change. And coaching helps that.
Love it. So if I was listening to you and I talking now as that third party, my absolute one golden nugget that I would take away so far from this conversation is debunking the myths around what coaching is and what it isn't. Because I do believe, and I know you're on a mission with this, that some people, when they hear that word coaching, it's like, oh, it's this big thing that goes here. Whereas it is about great communication. It is about live in the moment feedback. It is about coaching self. It is about colleagues coaching each other and holding each other to account. It is about, yes, leaders and managers, but in some ways, if it's the leader or manager having to give the feedback, it's almost, there's a couple of layers where it's fallen down in that case, isn't there?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. If people are having better conversations amongst themselves, rather than any level of escalation, that's where the magic happens at work, when you're building those strong relationships.
Yeah.
And one thing that I'm on it builds on my mission of a coaching culture is actually have something about what I call transformational conversations. So actually, when you're building trust, you're being riskier in the information that you're sharing, actually getting to know the human behind the task. So moving organizations from, just because you can have coaching task conversations, you can coach the task, but for me, how do you coach the human and get to know them as a human being? And I'm wanting more and more people to unlock relationships by building relationships through trust, getting to know why they come to work, what motivates them, what's the family, who are they, what's going on outside of work. Let's treat people as human beings, and they will behave like human beings at work. And coaching unlocks a lot of that. And my mission of transformational conversations is also one that I do a number of talks on, because people just don't get to know the people they work with. They get to know what task they're doing, rather
That's
than
a
what's
great
going
insight.
on. Yeah.
Brilliant, brilliant insight. There's a quote that I always use coming out of pandemic, and I truly believe the businesses that really did well through pandemic and built long-term relationships and trust with their colleagues and their employees and their teams were the ones that linked to this quote that said, people don't care what you know until they know that you care.
Yeah, I love that quote. It's
And
true.
it is about being genuinely interested, isn't it? In terms of, the individual. And I'm still work in progress with this, Joe. On a Monday morning when I come into work, I've gone through the playbook of the week in my mind. I know exactly what we've got to do. And when I kind of engage with the team, I'm already in delivery mode. So I'm like, right, guys. And it's like your bit of a gun going off. It's like, right, we're doing this week, this week. And the team look at me and go, Royston, did you have a good weekend? My weekend was really good. And I'm going like, oh, yeah, sorry. And it's not because I don't care. It's just because sometimes you get so focused. But I absolutely buy your point. It's about that genuinely being interested in the well-being, the individual, not just from a professional perspective, but also how work is an environment that helps them to fulfill their personal goals. And you do understand some stuff about, their children's names, birthdays, their wife, and so forth. You've got to make time for that stuff, haven't you?
Absolutely. And I think the word you said there was genuine. So I used to have a line manager who used on a Monday morning, I was in a sales team, and it was like he had a checklist. It was like, ask Jo if she had a good weekend. Tick. And and I used to wait for it, and it used to make me sort of smile because I knew I could have said, you know what, I've just had the worst weekend in the entire universe. And he'd go,
Yeah.
okay, good. And next, let's talk about the sales figures. And it's like, so it's about genuine care, taking that time and building those relationships, because people want to feel cared for and valued. They want to feel that they're making a difference. And
Yeah.
when people feel happier at work, and I've got a lovely James Timpson quote, and he's great at this. Happier people perform day in and day out, and they do. Happier people. And I started looking at happiness in the workplace last year, and honestly, I got quite a bit of pushback. Ooh, not bothered about happiness. And it's like, all right, what I mean is happier people, which is the ultimate outcome of a
Yeah.
coaching culture. People are, forget the word engagement, people are happier at work. They're not just engaged. Yeah, I'm doing this, then I'm engaged with what I'm doing. I'm actually enjoying what I'm doing. I'm thriving here. That should be the ultimate goal.
Yeah. And at Pathways, we talk about we don't do jobs, we do careers. Um,
Nice.
and our lives are broken into ostensibly thirds, aren't they? A third of your time is sleeping, a third of your time is in your personal life, and a third of your time is at work.
Yeah.
And what you're talking about here is through this coaching culture, how can you create an environment where people thrive, where they are
Yeah.
excited and look forward to coming to work because they're doing meaningful work, where they feel like they're adding value, they're part of a high performance team, their boss, leader, manager cares, and they feel they're in an environment where they can thrive and be the best that they can be.
Absolutely. And it's smashing out toxicity. This is a positive environment. This is a positive place to work. Somebody called my book, and I do quite like this quote, a love letter to humanity, because the book, while ever it's got the cheekiest title ever, that is cheeky, I know it is, and deliberately so, is a plea to organizations to start taking some of these actions, because performance will increase, whatever the measures are, whether it's people metrics, business metrics. People will develop and be better at work. It's to me, it's just like, this is the way forward, and it has to be. No matter what's going on in the world, we have to still care about our people, because they will then get the job done. The job done is the outcome, but also
Yeah.
happy people at work is the outcome. So yeah, it's so important. So get
Joe,
that.
let me throw a hand grenade in there.
Go on, do it.
So I absolutely buy everything you're saying, but my question for you is there a fine line though between being genuinely interested and caring, but the demarcation that there is a line between the work environment and your role as a leader manager, and you're not there to be the agony aunt for all the ailments of what's going on in somebody's personal life? Do you think there is a fine line with that, isn't there? About being genuinely interested, but not crossing that line, or do you think I'm wrong in what I'm saying?
That is a fabulous question. That's one of the killer ones you warned me about. I suppose I'm going to take you on I'm going to let me share a story and think through the story we might come to the answer. Um, well, one, there probably is a fine line, to be fair, because if somebody's experiencing some level of, emotional turmoil that's too much to handle as a leader and manager, then you've got the right support mechanisms around you to, whether that's counseling, therapy, the EAP programs. I think leaders and managers have got to have some level of capability to know what to have a human conversation. But I'm going
Yeah,
to share a story of somebody I know who went through a development program to move towards these. It was a leader and manager who moved towards transformational conversations. And the challenge as part of the development program was go and get to know your people. That was the homework. Go and tell them about you as your why. Why are you the way you are? Why do you turn up to work and ask for this, this, and this? Tell them why about you and get to know them. And that person was my husband. And he used to come home from work really quite upset and drained by some of the conversations he'd been exposed to, because people really unlocked the keys to their inner secrets. And he took on a lot, and he didn't feel overly equipped, but he got to know the people so much better. They got to know him, and his performance went through the roof. Absolutely. They started working for him rather than getting the tasks done, if that makes sense. It was amazing to see the results of his area. But I did say to him when he came home one night and he was really struggling and he was kind of decompressing some of this, and I just said, you have to remember that you are not a counsellor or a therapist. You're not trained, but you're there to be able to listen, but you have to be able to know when to signpost people to certain areas. On the back of a lot of those conversations where he truly got to know his people, the performance went through the roof, and it absolutely transformed him as a leader. And I've seen it literally in my own home,
yeah,
with somebody who's been an experienced leader for many decades, from going from that task focused leader, tell, to get to know your people. The performance went through the roof. So I do think there's a fine line, but I do think leaders and managers have got to have some level of capability and confidence to have an open conversation and then know where to signpost support.
yeah. Love it, love it. I
Yeah.
don't know whether you've read Kate Hayes' book. She's the psychologist for the England Lions women's football team. She's
No,
the
well,
psychologist for the FA. She's got a book out about how to win. It came out at the back end of last year. It
yeah,
is fascinating, and she talks about one of the exercises that they did with the players when she first went in. And
yeah,
Sabrina only had a really short window to get them ready for one of the
yeah,
major tournaments that they were in, 10, 12 weeks. And what they
yeah.
did was did an exercise where they sat all the players down, they paired them up. And what they did was they created a timeline that went from today right the way back to your childhood. And what they got them
Nice.
to do was above the line was to put markers down of all the major life events that happened in their personal life. And if it was a really, emotional intensive event, they extended the line. And if it was smaller, the line was much smaller above the line. And above the line was all the things that happened personally. And then below the line was all the things, the major events from where they were now, working back to their childhood. Below the line was all the professional. And of course,
No,
these lines were some were really long, some were short. And she said that just completely transformed and got people to understand what motivated people, why they thought like they did, some of their life experiences, some of the traumas that they'd had, what was great in their life. And she said, literally they accelerated the learning and understanding of the team massively just by doing that exercise. And she thought it was going to take like a morning, but they ended up spending a whole day doing it because it just took that much time for the two people to share their own timelines.
I absolutely love that. I've got an exercise that I've taken into organizations as an employee, but also now as a sort of consultant, coach, facilitator, is literally that open question in teams. Tell me about yourself, and I don't want to know your CV. So
Yeah,
don't tell me about your CV, tell me about you.
yeah,
And I did it in one team, and one person was like, I am really nervous about this. I have been in this business 20 years and nobody has ever asked me that. I am nervous to be open in the team. And it was like, look, let's agree, let's contract for this. Let's have this psychological safety in this, room. And literally everybody opened up and people like, wow, I've been working with that person 10 years and I had no idea that had ever happened. And literally the understanding and empathy and care and appreciation for the human alongside you in the team just went up like that. And it's so important. It makes a difference because people feel heard and they do feel valued. And if you know more about a human, when it comes to work relationships, the work bit becomes easy. It becomes easy because you're dealing with the human rather than the task.
I love that. You've talked about that. That's one of my golden nuggets I'm taking away from today, that as leaders, it's about the human connections, not just the task focused. And you've talked about it a couple of times, and I really like that delineation. So what I'm hearing is that there is a fine line, but in summary, leaders and managers have got a way to go between being more humanly connected as opposed to task orientated. We've still got a long way to go in terms of getting connected with our people.
Definitely. And I think the more people who raise awareness of the opportunity of this, and not just focus on the task, I think the more they'll see the unlocking of a difference in their organizations, their teams, because this is obviously about teams doing it. This is about teams getting, and then organizationally, and role modeling it from the top, I think is really important. I think we have got some way to go. I said it was a 30-year deadline till the age of 82, but it's now 29-year deadline. And then I've said, then everybody's on their own. At 82, that's it. You're on your own after that. But because it takes time to change people's thinking and behaviors. It really does.
Yeah. Can I close the loop on one thing you talked about earlier? Because you talked about the annual conversation. And just closing the loop on that, because I talk about that all the time. A good yardstick for how advanced you are in your coaching culture in your business would be that if the annual conversation is not just that should be the easiest conversation in the calendar year, because all that should be is a summation and summary of the 52, the 75, the 80 conversations that you've had all year. So in your business, if that conversation is difficult, challenging, or there's a misalignment in perception and reality, then that should be an alarm bell that's ringing that you haven't got what Jo talked about, which is this in the moment, live culture, coaching culture of inspirational and developmental feedback. And there's still a lot that we can learn from sport with that, Jo, isn't there? Because, elite sport is great for that live in the moment feedback. It's going on all the time.
Definitely. We can learn so much from sport in business. And I know people sometimes go, oh, not the sport analogy again. We're in business. But actually, they couldn't evaluate performance from 11 months ago and expect to have a good 11 months, could they? It's constant. It's constant. It's in the moment. And you're absolutely right. That final, whether it's the annual performance, should just be let's just have that moment in time to celebrate the conversations we've had, the development, the growth, whatever it is. It shouldn't be a shock. And there's some examples of shocks in my book. One that was a shock to me and one that I shocked somebody. And they're just key learning moments. We can be better than that. We absolutely can and should be.
And Jo, there's conversation now that as a business, you could have 5 different generations working in your organization. So when you talk about coaching culture, so I'm 52, so I'm Generation X, aren't I think?
Yeah.
Generation X. So naturally, I am wired in a certain way, but I'm also massively cognizant of the different generations and a lot of the younger generations. They're wired in a different way. They've got different motivations and drivers. So within the coaching culture, what consideration needs to be in there for those different generations that you might have? And how do managers and leaders need to adapt their style and not look at it through their lens of how they potentially been managed or led in the past, or their motivations and drivers. How do you make the switch to be relevant to those different generations?
Cool. Fabulous. Generational diversity. I love this topic. I interviewed somebody on this very topic only a couple of weeks ago. It is fascinating why we are different at different generations in the workplace and in life. So actually, for me, the conversation is about having the conversation. Not one size doesn't fit all. And while ever I'm talking to coaching culture, there's my one size fitting all. This is about having a conversation. What do you need from me? What do you need from me? Because somebody who's new in the workplace is not going to be the same as somebody who may have been in that same workplace, or they're 52 or 53 like me. So it's about having the conversation and acknowledging the needs and motivations of each individual, and bringing them together in the team as, in harmony, but recognizing and appreciating the differences. Because one of the things about generational diversity is and that came out clearly. I interviewed Russell Beck, the author of the brilliant book about the future of work till 2030. It was brilliant. He talked about weaponizing the different generations. So actually talking about, snowflake this, entitled that, and actually that's not fair. We've got to appreciate everybody for their different perspectives, thoughts, how they've been brought up. So for me, it's about have the conversation about what does that person need from you. And a leader and manager, the best question is, how can I help you to be the best you can be? What do you need from me? And let people tell them. Because if they don't ask, they'll never know, and they might end up trying to treat everybody the same, and that's so wrong. So yeah, generational diversity is a fabulous and fascinating topic, and I think we can harness and embrace the different generations, because our generation's got a lot to offer. We're not written off in our 50s.
Absolutely not.
At all. No. We bring so much knowledge, experience. We can look back and connect the dots. Whereas people in, maybe their 20s or 30s, they're looking forward in a different way, and they can bring so much to help us. Honestly, I think it's a fantastic time to embrace generational diversity rather than repel against it.
And Jo, there's a golden nugget that you just threw in there, which was a great question. I'll paraphrase. How can I help you to be the best that you can be? What do you want from me as your leader manager? And I think that I call that the soft contracting. And I think particularly when you move into a new team, or you've got new team members who join, doing that soft contracting early that says, what do you want from me as your leader manager? What style of leadership works for you? How can I help you to be the best that you can be? And then, of course, that's the first part of the equation. But then there's also, and let me be really clear about what my expectations are, and in return, what I want from you: honesty, trust, transparency, no surprises, whatever might be. And that, I call that the soft contracting.
Absolutely. And it is a contract, isn't it? It is a two-way thing. It's not one way. And I know you and I have talked about this in the past, and it's come up more and more. No more shit managers. You were the first person who put this in my mind, and it's come up since in different conversations about the next book. Is it No More Shit Employees? Which is
I was going to ask you that question. We were going to talk about that. You've just completely stolen my thunder. But no, you're up spot on. I know we talked about that, because there's always a yin and a yang, isn't there?
Yeah.
And your focus, absolutely right, in the book, the coaching culture is no more shit managers. But there's another part of the equation that's missing there, because managers can be the best that they can be in creating that coaching culture. If employees don't want to come to the party, then do you know what? It doesn't matter how good the manager is.
And it's a really good point. I got embroiled in a LinkedIn conversation, sort of comments and threads, because you put that into my mind for the very first time. I was like, oh, that's an interesting point. And somebody said, I've been advised that my next book should be entitled this. And somebody went, if you don't write it, I will. I think that's great. We do need to acknowledge this is a two-way contract. So you've absolutely hit on something there.
Maybe we should write it together.
Let's do it. Let's do it. Honestly, I
I
can't
mean,
imagine myself writing a book about no more shit. I genuinely can't. And I don't know why. I don't know why, but you are right. But it doesn't sit with me there. I don't know whether I'm like, speaking for all employees to look after them against shit managers, but actually it is the other way around. You are so right. And it's definitely coming up more. Somebody commented on LinkedIn, that somebody went AWOL for 3 days and then accused their when the manager sort of asked them some questions, they accused the manager of micromanaging. It was like, you've been AWOL for 3 days, and this is not called micromanagement.
and Joe, I do think this is a really important part of the equation because, again, if I was the listener to this, and as the host of the Life of Business Leader podcast, I always try to be balanced and think about how do we make this really relevant and what objections might the listener be thinking about. And one of them definitely is, okay,
Yeah.
great, we can be better leaders, managers, but our people have got to come to the party as well. And it's like you and I talked as well about feedback. Yes, let's educate, coach, enable managers with the mindset and skill set to be better at delivering feedback. But the bit I always see missed in the coaching culture is, have we enabled and trained and coached colleagues to be better with a mindset, skill set about receiving feedback? Because it's got to be a two-way process.
Got to be a two-way process. Whenever I've ever delivered anything on feedback or even in our coaching culture content, it's always, I call it GARF, giving and receiving feedback. It is
Yes.
absolutely two sides of the same coin. You can't give without receiving something. And also
Yeah.
having the confidence to feedback upwards. It can't just be a one-way street. Having the confidence to give your leaders and line managers feedback, and they should also have the confidence to ask for it.
Yeah. Oh my. I tell you what, Joe, we're coming to the end of our podcast today. I'm going to put it on the table now. We're going to have to come back and do a part 2 of this because there's so many golden nuggets that you're throwing out here. And this is so practical. And I want our listeners to really go away and think about this and go, okay, where are we at with really having that culture? Because I don't think enough organizations, whether you call it coaching culture, performance culture, it's almost, in some ways, it's almost irrelevant. But what leaders do need to put more time and effort into is really articulating and being more conscious and deliberate about the culture that is the enablement for how they optimize the number one asset that they have, where people can come to work and do their best work.
Definitely. Absolutely. I'd love to come back for a part 2 and more killer questions from Royston.
I've got one final question before we do close, because this is a missing piece of the jigsaw for me still. I wish I had £1 for every time I've had conversations about leaders, managers, giving feedback, live in the moment feedback. And the golden nugget that you hear is so often is the myth of, oh, I'll do it later. And guess what happens to later? It never happens. So my challenge for you is, why do we still have a challenge that people get this at a logical level that you can talk to them about it, but then they don't accelerate to particularly challenging or developmental conversations? They shirk away from them. So what ideas or advice would you give to managers and leaders about how they overcome the barrier of accelerating to the conversations, not falling into the trap of, oh, I'll do it later because later never happens? How do you get that live in the moment feedback embedded in the culture?
Well, I think we stop telling ourselves it's going to be a difficult conversation, it's a challenging
Love it.
conversation. It's a conversation. So that
Yeah.
would be my first one. It's a conversation. And 2, plan and prepare. So get yourself in the right headspace and think about, the potential outcome of the conversation, the purpose of the conversation, the outcome you want, but also be prepared to listen to what is being said in the conversation. So actually equip yourself with the confidence and the capability to have the conversation, and think about the potential reactions of the person that you're going to have the conversation. And it's all about the framing, back to the positive intent. So for me, it's a conversation, number one. So sort your mindset out on that. It's a conversation. And
Love it.
actually, not just that, often the best conversations, the most transformational conversations are those ones that you've been dreading, because you unlock something of openness and honesty that somebody may just have been blissfully unaware about, and you can make a change in somebody else's life and career by shining a light and giving them some feedback. So there's a lot of mindset stuff there for me, but also planning and preparation, getting yourself in the right headspace.
Love it. And then I love every single point you talked about there, particularly that first one where you went to, which was, if you think it's going to be a difficult conversation, guess what? You've set yourself up to fail straight away. And if you are coming from a position of feedback is from a positive intent where you're wanting to set the person up for success, then you look at it through a lens of positivity, not through a lens of negativity, which is your frame when you say, right, I need to have a difficult conversation with Joe. You are on the back foot straight away. So absolutely love it. Joe, this has been, I've really enjoyed it. You can probably tell I'm energized from the conversation. And, there's so much I think that you've shared today. There'll be definitely some golden nuggets. If people want to get a hold of you, understand more about your business and what you do, and of course, please, guys, go on Amazon and get the book. It is well worth the read. Jo comes across to me as really practical. She's a practitioner who is doing this every single day in businesses. So this isn't the theory of a coaching culture. It's the practical application of how you build a coaching culture in your business and really make it live. So if people want to get hold of you, Jo, where can they go?
People often find me hanging out on LinkedIn somewhere. So always contact me on LinkedIn. There's coachingculture.com website, and there's also jowright.com as well. So many places to find me. But LinkedIn is where you often see me stalking around there.
Brilliant. And let it be known that on episode 14 of The Life of the Business Leader, the concept and idea of no more shit employees was born. And if you see that book come out in the future, you never know who might be the authors of it. Jo, thank you so much for coming on. As always, from The Life of a Business Leader, I hope you got value from today's podcast. It is about making it practical, real world. And I think Jo has really demonstrated the importance and the why, the what, and the how of the coaching culture. So if you like what you've heard today, please share it. We want to get the Life of Business Leader exposed to more leaders who need to know this stuff. And from me, Royston Guest, your host, until the next episode of The Life of Business Leader, from Jo and I, goodbye for now.